Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul. I hope you'll forgive the whirring noise in the background. It was getting really hot while I was filming, so I put on the fan. Sorry, but I prioritize my comfort over you guys' ears. No offense, but I don't want to torture myself just making a YouTube video. With that subjectivity out of the way, let's talk about more subjectivity. We are here to talk about the two introverted judging functions, introverted feeling and introverted thinking, and talk about how both of them are extremely subjective by nature. And so therefore, all of the INTPs over the years that have gotten really angry at me for saying that introverted thinking is subjective logic, guess what? It's true. Because the alternative is subjective emotions, and we all know that is unheard of for the TP types, because having personal emotions, what the heck? That's not logical. But then you get the introverted feeling type. So if you're going to accept that Myers-Briggs is real, you also have to accept that there's going to be parts of your brain that are based entirely on you. Like, no matter how much you believe in Jesus and try to think about other people and other perspectives, as humans, we are naturally going to come to our own conclusions. But the way we come to conclusions is going to be different depending on whether we are an FJ or a TP type versus a TJ and an FP type. So in order to prove my point that introverted thinking is subjective logic, we need to prove that introverted feeling, by contrast, is subjective emotions. So what is introverted feeling defined as? It's defined as a personal moral compass / using personal emotions to come to a realization about what you believe in. So a lot of the FP and TJ types are going to have personal convictions about why things are right and wrong. Especially if you get, for example, the SJ types. They are going to have introverted sensing, so things that have been preserved over time, they're especially going to have this certain things have to be a certain way, but the TJs are going to be a bit more forceful about it. But the problem is, as much as they want to say they're being objective, they're not, because even though they're using extroverted thinking, which is outside of themselves, the reason why they're using extroverted thinking is their introverted feeling is telling them because I feel like it. So, for example, when an ENTJ is telling others what to do and forcing them to do all that labor and whatnot, it's not because objectively it's going to do the right thing. It's because the ENTJ, deep down inside, even if he or she doesn't want to admit it, is having emotions of, I need to get this done. We need to get this done. You can't differentiate yourself from the equation. I feel like this is important. We need to get this done. You can't be 100% objective there. You're going to have a desire, that is an emotion, that you're going to personally feel. But what about the TP and FJ types? Does that mean they don't have emotions? Extroverted feeling is defined as looking at the feelings of other people and trying to achieve harmony. Now, you could argue that this is also a bit subjective, because what constitutes harmony anyway? It seems like it's a person-to-person type of thing. But the emotions that they're picking up on aren't subjective, because by definition, they're not making up what people are feeling. They're simply noticing it. They can be wrong, but at the very least, they're noticing patterns that make them think that they're right. So, for example, if an FJ type sees someone crying, they're not going to immediately go in their brain and think, could this be a figment of my imagination? Do I feel like believing that that person is crying? They're going to say, no, that person is crying. That's an objective fact. There's tears coming from their eyes. I should do something about it. But then the question is, what do I do? And that's where the introverted thinking comes in, because introverted thinking is defined as an internal logical framework that the person uses their own frame of logical references to ensure that everything is logically consistent and makes sense according to their own perspectives. So therefore, it can't be objective, because for a TP type, everything, absolutely everything, even their own existence, has to make sense to the individual. But for some reason, every TP type is also going to have extroverted feeling. So a lot of times when they ask what makes sense, they're not going to be thinking about it from a selfish perspective. Sometimes they are if they're inferior extroverted feelers and they're suppressing that part of themselves. But I think every TP and FJ type is going to prioritize other people's emotions more than their own. If you get an INTP that's in a room full of upset people, you can guarantee they'll be paying more attention to that than their own emotions. You ask an INTP, what are you feeling? They'll be like, I don't know, I don't feel anything, because that's not logical. But you ask him, what is that person feeling? They'll say, well, I imagine they're probably sad, but like in their awkward NT way. But the point I'm trying to make here is that they're still working out how anything works when they come to a logical conclusion. Now, they try to claim that it's objective. They try to claim, well, by simple reasoning, this therefore has to be true. But a lot of times, their reason is going to be on a person-to-person basis. So there could be one ISTP who has a perfectly valid logical reasoning as to why God exists. Then you get another one that doesn't believe that God exists, and they also go through a logical reasoning to explain that point. How can both of them be true? The problem is that they can't because they're subjective. So how can one be 100% objective? The only way I could see that feasibly happening is if all four of a person's cognitive functions are extroverted. But can you imagine how chaotic that would be? If you had both extroverted sensing and extroverted intuition, you'd be wanting to constantly try out everything new, whether it's tangible or intangible. So you would never ever want to settle for the same, because you wouldn't have introverted sensing to make you contrast every single new thing. You just have to try it. And you'd be just this compulsive, ridiculous person. Or would you? Because you wouldn't have introverted feeling that gives you the personal conviction to want to do something or feel like doing it. You would entirely be thinking about other people all the time, but you'd also want to be efficient with everything all the time because you'd have extroverted thinking and extroverted feeling. But then there would be a contrast there because you can't really be efficient while also taking into account people's feelings. Because by definition, efficiency is doing everything as quickly and as resourceless as possible. But sometimes being quick involves hurting people's feelings. I know an example for me as a lesser extroverted thinker is that I like people to be prompt when it comes to their responses. And sometimes I will admit I have hurt people's feelings when I say, like, why does it take you 3 days just to say yes in a text? Why couldn't you have done it faster? And the person says, oh, but I was tired, and oh, I stayed up late, and oh, I this, and I that. And I'm just like, okay, why did it take you so long just to say yes? Were you incapable of pushing the buttons even when you were on the toilet? So as you can see there, the extroverted thinking is preventing me from feeling the other person's problems. I'm not able to 100% focus on the other person's emotions because my introverted feeling is simply too strong. And that's the case with every single individual. You're always going to have one introverted and one extroverted perceiving function, one introverted and one extroverted judging function. Because if you had only introverted functions, you'd never do anything. So let me give you a couple of examples of how I have seen the introverted functions at play, well, I guess specifically the introverted judging functions at play and why it's subjective. You get basically any of the FP types talking about their values. A lot of it is going to boil down to I feel it, so therefore it is. Especially for the IFPs. Oh my gosh, you should rewrite that saying, I think, therefore I am. To them, it's I feel, therefore I am. If they feel like they're a purple elephant, then goodness knows, to them, they're a purple elephant. You can't talk them out of it. You can't get them to say, okay, use your objective reasoning and really think about what you mean by that statement. But that's what the introverted thinkers would say. So you see how there's a bit of a contrast there? The introverted thinkers will say, what's your reasoning? Introverted feelers, because that's how I feel. I feel like I'm a purple elephant, so therefore I'm a purple elephant. I don't need to explain my reasoning to you idiots. But then in contrast, the introverted thinkers might come to a logical conclusion, and the extroverted thinkers will say, that doesn't make sense. what on earth are you getting that idea from? And they'll say, well, you're just not intelligent enough to know the depths of my logic. That doesn't answer the question. Where did you get that from? You see how there's a certain level of stubbornness when it comes to the introverted functions? The FP types are unwilling to go against their values, but the TP types are unwilling to go against their logic. You could make the argument for the perceiving functions as well. Like, the SJs aren't going to want to go against tradition. The NJs aren't going to want to go against their goals. But for the sake of keeping this video relevant, what's important is that we don't become so arrogant with either our thoughts or our feelings that we start to ignore the fact that humanity is made up of other people besides ourselves, and other people might have ideas or logic or experiences or feelings that might influence us. If I had stuck to my own personal feelings all my life, I would still be a sexist, probably semi-arrogant jerk. But because I learned, like, oh, you know what? These feelings are very different from my own. Maybe I should start respecting that. That helped me make more friends, helped me to get closer to God, helped this YouTube channel for that matter. It has essentially made my life better, and it's made other people's lives better. But at the same time, being around the TP types with their insistence on logic always making sense and being consistent has helped me to realize that maybe my logic isn't always necessarily wrong. Because I used to be the type that I'd feel something and I'd be absolutely convinced that it was true. And I would try to make a logical argument to define it, but my logic would usually be based on other people's information. So I'd say, like, well, based on this study by this person, therefore it must be true, rather than reasoning out if X equals Y, then Y equals blah, 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 like the introverted thinkers would do. But I have since learned that ISTJs, by virtue of being thinking types, are going to actually use introverted thinking well. They're just not going to want to do it because they prefer their extroverted thinking. So hypothetically, I could actually keep up with an INTP, well, maybe more likely to be an ISTP because they're sensing types. I could probably keep up with them in a logical debate or a logical reasoning test. The problem is that if I come to a conclusion that they approve of, I'll probably say, I don't know if I trust that. And they'll say, what are you talking about? That was a very well thought out, logically consistent answer. And I'll say, but it's from me. How can I prove that this is the right answer? And they'll say, well, truth is relative. So there you go again. Subjective. So what can both of the subtypes do to avoid falling into a subjective, judgmental behavior? Use your extroverted functions. That's how. So for me, if I want to avoid letting my feelings take over, I need to be able to look at the data and be able to say, okay, well, maybe if I look at things from a more impersonal perspective, maybe what I'm feeling doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. Why am I crying when someone dies if I believe that that person goes to heaven? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that's going to stop me from crying because I'm going to miss that person. But at least it can help me to not be so overwhelmed by my sadness that I don't get anything done. Conversely, the TP types could probably learn how to not be so stubborn with their reasoning if they use their extroverted feeling to think about other people's perspectives. Maybe there's something that they overlooked. Maybe their own experiences are so limited that it's limiting their logic. Their logic is probably bolstered by their own experiences, and so therefore could potentially be flawed. But if they use their extroverted feeling and say, okay, what is this person feeling? What is this person's experiences? Maybe they could realize that their conclusion could have been wrong. Oh, a novel concept! TP types can be wrong? My voice just did the most major pain I have felt in a long time, so I think I'm going to end it there. See, there's a subjective statement right there. I think. I'm going to end it there. So maybe I do have some semblance of introverted thinking. But I know for me personally, I don't relate to wanting logical internal consistency. I relate to wanting to know the facts. And I don't care if the facts don't make sense to me. I just want to know what they are. And then I believe them, even if it's inconvenient. But I need to realize that in order for those facts to have existed, the TP types needed to have worked out why those are facts and not fiction. So in a sense, I should be thanking them. But the TP types could potentially thank the extroverted thinkers for making sure that they had some way of compiling knowledge that in their search for the ultimate truth, they were able to come to that realization instead of just being stuck in their own heads and overthinking everything. So we can all learn from each of our extroverted brethren in some way or another. Now you might be thinking, what about those FJs? Or not the FJs, the IJs and the EP types. They're going to be more subjective in the perceiving functions. We'll get to that in another video, but for now, I hope that explanation made sense. Let's not draw this out any further because my throat is sore. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. INTPs, try to hold in your anger for me saying that you have subjective logic. INFPs, try to hold it in for me saying that your feelings might not necessarily be indicative of reality. Analyze a situation from both feeling and thought, and maybe you can come to an agreement. That's what all of us IJ and EP types try to do. Use both our feelings and our logic. So, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day, and remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.